feels like not only did Jaguar do the very opposite of what they said they were doing, that they weren't copying anyone. They're copying everyone.
The whole point of a Jaguar was you were getting Aston Martin quality for less money. And
Gotcha.
the driver of a Jaguar was always sort of smoking in the back of the car, probably had 2 or 3 mistresses. You know, it was always aimed at that guy that never quite managed to make it in life. So it was perfectly British in that way. So why would you turn an iconic brand into men in dresses? And what is it? Just complete political capture and ideological capture, or is there a solid piece of marketing? Because as I said, they think that 80% of new Jaguar owners will be first-time Jaguar buyers.
Well, I think it's purely for political reasons and to say that they're in step with the culture. But to come back to where we started, I actually think they're terribly out of step with the culture.
Welcome to another episode of The World According to Taunton and Fox, where I, Laurence Fox, speak to Larry Taunton about the ways of the world. I do that solely because I need a fix of Kamala, and I don't get Kamala anymore. Going, it's gonna be fine in the morning. I'm gonna win. And I miss Kamala's. I miss her so much. I feel I must do some accents to try and appeal to whoever is watching our show. Do you agree? Or do you
I
think it's
agree
bad stuff?
wholeheartedly. And you know what? Somebody posted in the comments, Laza, a possible, yet another alternative name to the show, The World Tauntoned and Foxed.
That sounded a bit aggressive, almost hate crimey.
Yeah, which is why I like it.
Okay. Well, can I just tell you, by the way, thanks to you, or possibly me, we have had some YouTube problem. They're upset with us. It was called. We got an email from YouTube saying that it was something like wild speech or something like that. Anyway, they're very upset with us. And
It's probably my fault. I'm absolutely on their top 10 list of most wanted, and they've been suppressing my channel big time for quite some time, but that's okay. And I just look at it and I just go, WTF? What the Taunton and Fox?
World being taunted and foxed. Right. Now listen, Trump. Girls, I've just heard, apparently, I mean, is this breaking news that in America they're seriously contemplating not letting men in women's toilets? I mean, this is a terrible regressive gesture, isn't it?
I think I saw that you tweeted about this, and I did too. This Jaguar commercial.
Oh God.
Yeah, which is incredible. And let me offer an alternative version of that commercial. Just imagine this, and you can, because you're from the movie industry. You could produce this and make it much nicer than the way I imagined it. But at first, I thought that it was a parody of woke culture, and then of course it turned out not to be that. But in their version, elevator doors open and out walk the march, the woke mob, and they're bizarre. And it turns out that this is what Jaguar is doing to celebrate woke culture. And then it says, copy nothing. And I thought, you've copied everything. You've copied woke culture. But I thought, what about a version like this, where the doors open and out march this woke mob, all alike in how bizarre they are. And then the camera pans to a gorgeous Jaguar, and the doors open, and out steps a beautiful heterosexual couple. It's just strikingly beautiful. And then the commercial ends by saying, copy nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the Jaguar thing has always been in the UK, it's been more power and more luxury than you deserve for the money. other than things like E-Types and stuff like that, which were iconic and wonderful cars. And I have always been, I'm famously a Jag man. I've owned Jags all my life. I love them. But I do find this idea of going, I know what they're doing. They are anticipating, the globalist plan to turn everyone electric, which will happen, and that's fine. But I just don't want to be rushed into it. What they're doing is they're positioning themselves for the young, non-binary, wealthy people who don't have to pay to send their kids to school, who are willing to spend an extra 10 to 15,000 quid on their little electric iPhone on wheels. So I sort of see where they're coming from, but I have this weird cognitive dissonance. So I understand why they're doing it, which is they just want to become like a sort of woke, non-binary double mastectomy nightmare. But the idea of the Leaping Jaguar is understood and seen as a brand across the world. So why would someone destroy a brand willingly until you get to the video, which we should probably play at this juncture?
And at Jaguar, we are passionate about our people, and we're committed to fostering a diverse, inclusive, and unified culture that is representative not only of the people who use our products, but in a society in which we all live, a culture where our employees can bring their authentic selves to work. And we're on a transformative journey of our own, driven by a belief in diversity, inclusion, creativity, policy, and most importantly, action. We've established over 15 DEI groups such as Pride, who are here tonight in the back. Thank you guys for coming. Women in Engineering and Neurodiversity Matters. We've launched major policy revisions such as transitioning at work to drive equity and support for our communities, embracing individuality as our superpower.
And there you have it, the brand manager of Jaguar talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I have a feeling that this may be a moment that Jaguar live to regret. I've gone beyond caring, other than to say that I'm really interested to see what happens. I'm really interested to see people going to suddenly buy Jaguars. I wouldn't. Would a young woke person buy a Jaguar? Probably not. I mean, who are they aiming it at? Permanently at home, non-binary people in dresses who live in towns. Maybe there's a big market. They are saying in their marketing blurb, they think that between 80 and 90% of people who buy a new Jaguar will have never owned a Jaguar before. But my thing of that Leaping Jaguar is that's a brand. It's established. How many millions of pounds must it cost over the years to establish this brand and this iconic car? And you just throw it away and turn it into a curvy, non-binary waste of time. Why do you think someone would do that, other than for ideological reasons? Give me a steel man marketing reason why someone would do that, and it was a good idea.
Well, of course I can't. And if I'm not mistaken,
yes, you can. You're a very bright man.
Doesn't James Bond drive a Jag in one of the most iconic? Isn't that old Jaguar and say Dr. No or some of the and then
No.
the more modern version is
it's a DB5. It's an Aston Martin DB. It's a DB5. But the whole point of a Jaguar. So just for and Americans who know anything about cars will understand this. But the whole point of a Jaguar was you were getting Aston Martin quality for less money, and the driver of a Jaguar was always sort of smoking in the back of the car. Probably had 2 or 3 mistresses. It was always aimed at that guy that never quite managed to make it in life. So it's perfectly British in that way. But you are smart. So I want you to play devil's advocate. And I want you to turn around and say, why would you turn an iconic brand into men in dresses? And what is it? Just complete political capture and ideological capture? Or is there a solid piece of marketing? Because as I said, they think that 80% of new Jaguar owners will be first-time Jaguar buyers.
Well, I think it's purely for political reasons and to say that they're in step with the culture. But to come back to where we started, I actually think they're terribly out of step with the culture. Now, I think this commercial was just released, but it most certainly production began on this before the election. And what we're seeing now, particularly on this side of the pond, not there yet, but I think it's coming. And you said it in the last episode that as the United States goes, Britain goes. But I think that now we are seeing the woke house of cards is going to start crumbling. There is a war on woke. I want a war on woke. I want to burn it all to the ground. Yes, YouTube, when you send another email to Laza Fox telling him that his channel has been suppressed, please reference me in this comment right here. I want to see a Sigourney Weaver like, flamethrower in hand, burning all that crap, all that garbage to the ground. I don't want to see any more of these woke people. I want to see any more of this quote unquote non-binary garbage. And yes, on Capitol Hill, you are seeing a war on it right there, where they do not want, congresswomen do not want a congressman who claims to be a woman going into their bathroom and saying, no, we don't want it. We're not tolerating it. I think that crap is out of date. And therefore, to me, it feels like not only did Jaguar do the very opposite of what they said they were doing, that they weren't copying anyone, they're copying everyone. But not only that, it shows that they're out of step. They're behind the times. We are moving in another direction. And something that I think is going to happen here, Laws, and you can tell me if you think I'm right as it relates to this. In 2016, when Trump won, there was not a institutional, and by institutional, I mean government institutions, big tech, media, Hollywood, education. There was not a turn to the right that corresponded with the way America voted. If anything, there was a very, very hard turn to the left. I think this time we are going to see, and are already starting to see, an institutional turn to the right. We've seen that with Miss Universe, a beautiful white, blonde, blue-eyed,
no penis
woman
though.
with no penis.
No, but that's really upsetting for me. I was really used to Miss Universes with penises, and now I feel robbed. But I do think you make an amazing point, which hadn't even crossed my mind, which was Jaguar did this. This whole process of rebranding must have taken. There's an 800 strong design team at Jaguar, right? So this thing must have been taking place over a period of years, in anticipation of the progressive. The brilliant pieces of progress that we've had across Europe this week, where the mayor of Berlin has said, if you're Jewish or gay, then please try and hide that, because we've progressed so far, we're progressing into Kristallnacht. But they must have planned this stuff years in advance, this big rebrand, and then to offer it up to us, and we're all just sat there going, I think that's actually the answer to the question that I was asking you, which is why would they do it? And I think your answer is practical, which is they wouldn't. If they knew the way the world was turning, they would have completely shelved that ad in 2 minutes, but they didn't. It's very encouraging. And I think what you're saying is yeah, when Trump came in, it was more like, how could this anomaly happen? It's terrible. Let's attack him solidly. But now he comes in again. He's battle hardened. He's literally survived being shot at. He's been, shot fired. And he is coming in with a team to destroy woke culture. And he's doing it in a way. And I want to ask you some, you're almost a generation above me. My father, I spoke to my father this morning, and he said to me, he didn't approve of a tweet I put out about the police, because the police in the UK, as you know, are acting insane and crazy. But I was thinking to myself, not long ago, we had a fight in us, we would go, you can say what you want. These other people are saying this stuff and you got to fight for it. But there's a fear, in my view, emanating across Britain, whereas Trump is going, I am going to come, I'm going to take the deep state. Well, he's not doing, he's getting Matt Gaetz it, but he's going, we're going to rip this thing apart. We're going to destroy it. And there's a glee in it. And I'm so encouraged by that. But my dad says to me, well, yeah, but it's what you're tweeting not like a Christian. You've got to try and put Christ in there. You've got to think about Proverbs 32. You've got to do that. So at what point does Trump's approach, which is I'm going to rip this thing to shreds and I'm going to do it in front of you and enjoy it, and now I have the experience, meet the Christian worldview of how to deal with demons?
Whew, boy, that's a heavy question. Let me say one more thing about Jaguar that just popped into my head before we go to that. You would have been much too young to remember, but I was a freshman in college when the space shuttle Challenger blew up. It's one of those events in my life where I know exactly where I was when someone said the space shuttle just blew up. And I thought, nah, you initially meet that with disbelief. Hollywood, in preparation for that launch, because it was the first launch with a woman on it, and a school teacher had been selected, Krista McAuliffe. She was being sent into space, and so Hollywood, to mirror that huge event, made a movie called Space Camp, and the main protagonist is a woman. And after it blew up, they debated, do we still release this movie? And they did, and it tanked. It tanked. So you had the blow up of the Space Shuttle Challenger, followed by, a couple of weeks later, the big release of this movie Space Camp, which no one wanted to see. To me, that's what this Jaguar commercial was. It shows you just how out of step they are with the culture and where the culture is going. Having met your father and respecting your father and spoken with him and got a sense of his own. I don't pretend to know him well, but I certainly have something of a sense of his own Christian convictions. Your father, isn't shallow when it relates to these things. So I'm sure that whatever it was that he said to you, he had reasons for saying it and for thinking it. So I won't necessarily challenge what he says because I really don't know, and I'm not sure what exactly is in his head as it relates to this. But I will say this: I think that Western Christianity, and especially particularly English-speaking Christianity. So I've encountered, some of the top figures in the Christian world in Australia, New Zealand, Britain, and America in my own work. And what I find frequently is that they have bought into a milquetoast version of Christianity that meek has come to mean weakness. It's come to mean, this thing that I told you that I can't stand, that I see in this guy. Suddenly his name has gone out of my head. He wrote the book Radical. Anyway, doesn't matter. But where they're holding their sweater sleeves in their hands, and they look like women, and I think you described it well. You said they're trying to shrink and appear, kind of non-threatening. It's something that I just can't stand, the body language and the way they sound and the way they talk. And you compare that to generations earlier of Christians who were muscular, a Christian faith that had teeth, that they believed there were things fighting for. I mean, C.S. Lewis said the Christian faith is a fighting religion. Imagine writing that now. That wouldn't resonate with anybody, but it did with the generation to whom he was writing. And so I think that there is a time and place, and certainly we see it throughout Scripture, for the literal smashing of idols, of evil, of what I was saying earlier, the Sigourney Weaver, flamethrower, burning it all to the ground. There is a place for that. And I'm mindful of it right now because you wouldn't have probably seen it. I was tweeting it while you were getting your camera set up, and I was noticing that there was there's Catholic priest who keeps tweeting out of context Bible verses in which he is guilting Westerners, both Brits and Americans, that if they don't accept hordes of foreigners into their own country, that they are not Christian. He says this repeatedly, that Trump's policy is not Christian. And my response to that was say, you're a liar. I mean, God called the people of Israel to be separate. Foreigners in their midst was a sign of God's judgment against them. And so I feel like we've been given a chance with Trump's victory in this country. We've been given a reprieve of execution, and we've been given an opportunity to destroy the idols of this culture. And the idols of this culture are the woke aspects of the culture. It's things like the Jaguar commercial, which are an abomination. They're an offense to God. It is the transing of children. Yes, you can add that. You can flag that. YouTube, add my name to that in the letter that you send to Laurence Fox. So it's all that kind of stuff that has to be destroyed. And I think our acceptance of it and our tolerance of it is also an abomination to God. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think what the conversation was about was that Dad was saying you're heading for running with the authorities.
And you are.
And I said, yeah. But what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, which is where I nicked it from, let me just read it because it's worth reading again, just so that everybody can know, because it's so important, and people forget this. Solzhenitsyn was trying to tell people with the benefit of hindsight, which is what one would call wisdom, isn't it? Hindsight is where wisdom comes from. I mean, those of us lucky enough to have wisdom in foresight are few and far between. Anyway, Solzhenitsyn says, and how we burned in the camps later, thinking, what would things have been like if every security operative, when he went out at night to make an arrest, had been uncertain whether he would return alive and had to say goodbye to his family? Or if, during the periods of mass arrests, for example, in Leningrad, when they arrested a quarter of the entire city, people had not simply sat there in their lairs, appalling with terror at every bang of the downstairs door and every step on the staircase, but had understood that they had nothing left to lose, and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall an ambush of half a dozen people with axes, pokers, or whatever else was at hand. The organs of the state would very quickly have suffered a shortage of officers and transport, and notwithstanding all of Stalin's thirst, the cursed machine would have ground to a halt if we didn't love freedom enough. And even more, we had no awareness of the real situation. We purely and simply deserved everything that happened afterward. And to me, that was an invocation, because I read that, and the irony of this, I'm referring to a tweet I put out, by the way. I'm not sure if I framed this properly. I put out a tweet, which we can maybe put on the screen, which was to say that perhaps we should greet the pigs, as I refer to the police, who do not police us properly, with an axe when they come to our door as a sort of self-defense mechanism. Is that I was talking to my dad about the speed, the pace, and at what point do you define what's happening as tyrannical? At what point does it take a journalist to get arrested, the highest profile journalist in the UK to get arrested, one of the highest profile journalists in the UK to be visited by the police for a so-called hate crime? At what point do you turn around and take on what Solzhenitsyn is saying, which is we were all way too late to the party? It was only by the time we reached the gulags that we realized that we should have stood up before and put the police in their place. And in England, we have this very nebulous concept that we're policed by consent. It's not law enforcement like it is in America. It's policing by consent. And what the police have done is totally reneged on their mission. We've just found out today that the Jewish Chronicle reports that an Islamic mullah has not been found to have broken the law for saying that we should burn down the houses of Jews. You know, he's invoking that, and that's not deemed to be a crime. And I'm finding this very strange, and I'm sure it's been done before, and it's definitely part of the Hullebeck book about submission, is this very peculiar relationship between Islamism and the left in the United Kingdom, because Islamism also wants to suppress free speech. Islamism also wants to destroy Christianity and wants all the same things that wokeism wants. But those two, it's a very unhappy marriage. And I think my dad was trying to say to me, you're heading into danger. And I was saying, yeah, but surely I should. This is danger. This is what I should do. I'm invoking from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. Free of what? Jews? Because that's what they mean when they sing that. And when they say Houthis, do us proud, turn another ship around, what are they asking? They're asking you to fire a missile at a civilian merchant shipping and turn it around and stop international trade taking place. So they're invoking violence. We've had people let off in the United Kingdom recently for shouting, rape the Jews, kill their daughters. They're let off. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to compose a tweet which is just as provocative as what they say, and let's see what the authorities do. And I want to have that confrontation with them, and I want to stand up in a courtroom, and I want to defend my right to speak freely. And I think my dad was saying, you're going to lose. I think that's what he was saying. I don't know. I mean, I was pretty hard with him, to be fair, but we're quite robust with each other when we talk. I don't know. I'm just sort of unloading on you now. It's not really an argument. I'm just letting you know stuff that happened.
Well, I can see both perspectives. As a father of 3 boys and a daughter, if one of them was doing what you're doing, I would be worried for them. But that's because I have a different set of rules for them than I have for myself. So there's a lot of dangerous things. In fact, I was just in South America doing some things that are quite dangerous. If I would be alarmed if one of my children were doing that. And yet at the same time, I suspect your father understands and respects why you're doing what you're doing. It's just that he loves you and you're his child and he doesn't want to see you in harm's way. But I certainly get it. I know why you do that. I would be doing the same thing. One thing that Twitter is not good for is that you've given a very nice context to that Alexander Solzhenitsyn quotation. Twitter doesn't always allow, for what is it, 240 characters that it allows. You can't always set up a quotation for that like that. And it allows for the left to seize upon it and for them to quite deliberately take it out of context. Don't you think?
Well, I deliberately provided them with no context. That was the whole point. So my point was, what I wanted to do was, I've been reading and seeing relentlessly. Obviously, we've got this Axel Ruda-Cabana problem in the UK, which is where the government lied to us about this guy who was an Islamist. He was found to have, we were lied to, and he murdered 3 innocent young children. And I'm, it's difficult to get to the bottom of one's feelings. And I think what my dad is asking me to do is think deeply. And what I'm saying is the quality of Christianity really is about, how do I put this in a way which doesn't sound like an idiot? It's about teaching. It's about making somebody, bringing them closer to God, which means that you can make mistakes on your way there. But the word is absolute, and that's fine. So the idea for me is like, okay, well, how does a Christian deal with a demon? Because that's what I think Islamist murderers of children are. I think they're demons. And I think the ideology that has fueled them into doing what they're doing is demonic. And interestingly, I saw today that demons often are referred to in the Bible as they, them, we, us. They're not singularized.
They're pronouns.
Yeah. So I think what he was trying to say is, how does a Christian deal with this? And I think there's something about Christianity which is about, there's something about deterrence, which is, if you do this, your punishment will be this. Right? Whereas in Islam, it's, if you do this, your glory will be this. So if you're encouraging, the reason why we don't have moderate Muslims criticizing the work of extremist Muslims is because no such thing as a moderate Muslim. So they can't criticize it. Whereas a Christian should really, a good Christian in a righteous fight, I hope, please help me, should stand up to demonic behavior and call out demons where they see them. And that means not having to provide context. It means showing the demon the light of its own reflection, which is, I can't express, I don't have the intellect to express what I'm trying to express. I'm struggling, sorry. But I think the main value of Christianity in its defense against Islam is to say the deterrent version is this. So if you do this, your judgment will be this. Whereas Islam is, if you do this, you shall conquer this. And I think it's a very difficult conversation to have with a Christian like my dad, who's a peace-loving man. And I'm a peace-loving man. I don't want to see people die, but I also don't want to see young girls killed and excuses made for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
really
you're arguing for justice.
right.
You're not arguing for revenge. You're arguing for justice. And if I can use a biblical, reference here, sticking with our theme here, thinking about it from a Christian point of view, part of what you're trying to do, and I think of my own work in this context, is you have the famous story of David and Goliath, but long before David slings that stone at Goliath, the way that story goes is very interesting. It's Goliath comes out daily and he blasphemes the God of the Israelites. He comes out every day mocking them, trash talking them, saying, "Come on, send somebody out here to fight me. Come on." And it says that the Israelites cowered in their trenches. Then David, the boy shepherd, is sent by his father to take food, wine, this sort of thing to the soldiers in the field. And he gets there and he sees Goliath and he goes, "Why is it that this uncircumcised Philistine is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" And David's older brother says to him, "You're arrogant. You're arrogant. You're so full of you. You ever heard this before?" I mean, because David is expressing confidence in his God. And he's saying, "Why are you guys allowing this?" The immediate response is to say, "Get out of here. You're arrogant." And David says, "I'll fight him. I'll fight him." And they're so desperate that to their shame, they're willing to use a shepherd boy whose martial skills have not been proven to them, but they're so desperate, they're so cowardly that they're willing to put him out there. And of course, David goes out and he kills Goliath. And then this happens. It says a shout went up from Israel. All these people cowering in the trenches, seeing what David did, their confidence was suddenly restored. And it says they pursued the Philistines, until sundown. I think what you're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, what other people like us are trying to do, whether or not they have a podcast or, Megyn Kelly following or not, is in their own way, they're trying to model, this is what you do. This is the way we respond to bullies. We don't tolerate this. We get out and we push back. And the hope is that other people see it. They see what we're doing and they say, "I can do that too. I'm going to push back." And I think in this country, it has happened. I think that's why the election turned out the way it did, because there were loads of Davids all over our culture. And they range from, Tucker Carlson straight on down to guys like me and you, who are getting out there and we're saying, "Come on, people, get off your hands, get out of the trenches, get out there and push back with your neighbor, with your boss, with your friend that you meet at the water cooler each day at work. Push back at this garbage. Push back." And the result was that millions of Americans stood up and said, "Enough. We're sick of you. Enough." And you're trying to bring about that same kind of shout, that same kind of reaction among the British people. You want that day in court. I get it, because you want the confrontation, because you want to say, this stuff has to end. And we need other people to stand up and do what I'm trying to do here in my own small way. Do you think that's a fair characterization of where you are and what you're trying to do?
Is one trying to bring about justice and fairness? I think yes. My not anxiety, because I'm not anxious about it, but my concern is, is my dad saying you're overreaching, or is it just parental concern? So is it right? I find it absolutely insane that we live in a country whereby we don't criticize an ideology because they'll cut your head off if you do. I just find that insane. It's like, at what point do normal, sensible people, and I've been having this conversation with people who I work with politically, and they say, well, how do you turn the culture wars into a political issue? And I say, well, it's really simple. You have to make it about one thing. And if you make it about one thing, you have to make it about Islam. That's the only thing you can do. You have to, especially in the UK, because America doesn't have this problem yet. You have to make it about Islam and how antithetical Islamic values are to Western values. And then you say, if, for example, if somebody started up an anti-Islam party, like Geert Wilders' party in the Netherlands and stuff like that, a somewhere, a home party which resisted radical Islam, it would be very popular in the United Kingdom. And I don't want to do that because I don't want to be. I don't really want to do. I think politics is generally hateful, and I think Trump is successful because he's not a politician. But I do think that I have to say what I say. And I mean what I say as well. And I have to believe that if I believe in Christ, then therefore I am not betraying my faith in him by saying it. So you said that there was a verse in Ezekiel about this, because, what is a proportionate human response to this sort of, they call it gaslighting now. I would call it, demon enabling. What was the verse in Ezekiel about?
Well, I just tweeted it. I just tweeted it during this filming, and it's, first of all, let me give the context of why I tweeted it. I keep seeing guys like Russell Moore. Russell Moore is an alleged evangelical in this country who is absolutely owned by the left, but he has penetrated evangelical circles and pretends to be a conservative, and it's weird. They like to hold Trump to this very strict priestly standard while applying none of those standards to the left. And here's one of them. This is apparently a Catholic priest, James Martin S.J. And he tweeted this: President Trump's refugee and migrant policies are manifestly unchristian and utterly contrary to the Gospels. Now, this is complete nonsense, but I see guys like this tweeting this kind of stuff all the time. And it's their way of guilting Christians or people who have been deeply influenced by Christianity but don't really know the Bible. It's what I call Christian-ish. I lay lots of guilt on you in order to manipulate you because I'm confident you don't actually really even know the Bible, let's say. And so this guy says this, and there are a lot of people who are going, oh gosh, I guess if we don't want illegal aliens in our country, if we don't want Muslims here, if we don't want people who are raping our children, I guess, I'm not being loving, I'm not being a Christian. And I tweeted this. And by the way, this is just one of many verses which speak to this. This is from Ezekiel 28 that says, thus says the Lord God, I will bring foreigners upon you, the most ruthless of the nations, and they shall draw their swords against the beauty of your wisdom and defile your splendor. Now, that's a slightly truncated version of these verses because I couldn't get it all in there, so I had to edit it down just a little bit. But the point is this, that God uses consistently throughout Scripture, he uses foreigners in your land as a means of punishing nations that have rejected him. You reject me, I'm giving your land to foreigners. I'm giving your women to foreigners. I'm giving your children to foreigners. I'm giving your possessions to foreigners, and they will defile it all. That's what's happening in Britain. That's exactly what is happening in Britain. And me personally, let me add this. Again, YouTube, you can flag this right here too. We don't have nearly the Muslim population that you have in Britain or in continental Europe. But we do have a lot of them, Somalis and others, and say like Minneapolis, Tim Walz's city, and in Dearborn, Michigan. I want to empty out both of those cities of every Muslim. I want to put them on taxpayer-funded flights, just like the ones Biden was using to bring them into the country. I want to load them up, and I want every one of them out. Every one of them. And I say that as a guy who feels great compassion for many of these migrants who are coming to our country, which I'll explain later, but not for them, because Muslims do not share our values at all, and they defile them. They defile them. So I want them gone.
So where is the, I think my dad is so much, he understands the Bible. He studied the Bible since he was born again. So he knows the Bible really well. He will throw at me, if I say something, he will go, well, maybe you should read this. So I would say, so this is a man that thinks deeply. So I have an instinct which comes across from what you're saying, which is God has a people, and those people, if they don't respect him, they're going to be overrun. And if they don't live the life of the message, they're going to be overrun. So they've got to be robust in their defense. But what would you say to the people who came to Dearborn, Michigan, who just happen to be culturally Muslim? Would you say to them, okay, the thing is, guys, it's fine, but you need to renounce Islam to be in America? Because that would seem to me to be antithetical to the American idea of free speech and the right to, life and liberty, the God-given inalienable rights. How do those two things marry? Because it says under God, and to them, that's God.
Well, I don't think it's antithetical, because I think anyone coming into this country, they have to be able to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I would make them swear an oath to that. And then I want you to eat that barbecue sandwich to prove it. Eat that piece of bacon. There's the bacon litmus test to get into my country.
But
I don't
it isn't.
want them. And it's because their culture is antithetical.
But then, at the same time, the Jews have food things as well. One has to sort of turn around and go, at what point are you guys going to acknowledge refrigeration? I mean, do you want us to you just walk up a kosher Jew or a Muslim to a fridge and open it up and go, look, we can keep it cold. We can smoke it and it'll last for days. You'll be fine.
Barbecue is good. You know that. You've had it right here. I'm in barbecue
I love
central.
it.
But Muslims are of a culture. If anybody spends any real time in a Muslim culture, and of course London is basically a Muslim culture now, but you go to the third world and to a Muslim, to an Islamic state, what you'll find is there's no free speech. What you'll find is misogyny. What you will find is abuse of women, of children, especially of those who are not of any kind of Muslim heritage. And what you'll find is a totalitarianism within those cultures. I've been there. I've spent a fair amount of time in them. I've seen what they do to women. I've seen what they do to foreigners. Just even in a so-called moderate Muslim state like Egypt, where I was earlier this year, and I will be again in January, Christians are not allowed to participate in the culture. It's why they live in what's called Garbage City, just outside, on the outskirts of Cairo. Church bells do not ring out in Muslim states. I debated a Muslim woman on CNN International about free speech, and she kept going on and on about how Muslims believe in free speech. And I thought, you're an idiot. This was weird to me. CNN International, based in London, when they said they wanted me to debate free speech with a Muslim, I thought, I'm so excited because CNN International, being as they are in London, is going to be able to get for me a real Muslim. You know what they got? They got a hippie Baptist Muslim convert from North Carolina who knew nothing about Islam. And I just said to her, name for me a single Islamic state that practices free speech. That was the end. She could not think of a single one, and that's because there isn't one. So their culture is antithetical to our own.
There's a paradox here, which is that I also have spent a lot of time in Islamic countries, and I've spent a lot of time in Egypt and filming twice. I think I've filmed in Egypt and once in Morocco, and I became very friendly with my driver. And he drove me. He said, will you come and eat with us? And he drove me out to his house, and I was treated like a special guest. with great hospitality by this guy. But what I noticed was the friendship is excellent because they're very confident in what they think and they believe and what they feel. There's a huge confidence, and what you're describing with the Archbishop or this evangelical guy is that it's a capitulation. We don't have any confidence in what we're trying to live, express, be, and mean, to the point where we lose all meaning. And as you say, hordes of foreigners will come and defile us. They knew, but him as a guy who drove me every day to and from work was a very, very lovely and warm and welcoming guy. And I went and ate with his family. Yes, the women ate in a different room. And yes, we all had to eat with our hands. But I saw him in a very friendly light. So I'm just trying to, rather than put up huge walls, which I think do need to be put up, big, strong walls need to be put up. I want to know about the person that comes to Dearborn, Michigan and doesn't give a shit about Allah, just wants to make a better life for themselves, but feels that their entire, everything they've known from cradle to now was based in that faith, but they actually want to shrug it off to come to America. And, does that happen or not? Or am I being an idealist?
I think these are two very separate things here. Don't hear me saying that I don't have Muslim friends or that I have not had very friendly, similar experiences to what you're describing in many parts of the world. There is Muslim friends that I look forward to seeing again when I am in Egypt. But that doesn't equate to me bringing them into the United States. So I think those are two very separate questions. I can have respect for them as individuals, as human beings, for their desire to better themselves, change their political circumstances, to pursue freedom, to pursue happiness, even help them in achieving it. I'm very much a believer in that, but that doesn't mean I bring them into my home. An example that I might use of this, Laurence, there are all kinds of people that I might minister to as a Christian that I don't bring into contact with my family or with my children, that I don't open my doors to. That's a very separate kind of thing. Ranger is going nuts
I
right now.
love it. I was just hearing him and going, I miss you, brother.
There is an illegal alien somewhere on my property right now. And if you're an undocumented illegal on my property, he does not allow it.
It may be Enrique Armadillo, who okay, look, we have got into this, but the thing that I really want to know about, because obviously I just really want to know about this. And you said something interesting to me. So for those that don't know, you've been down in South America and on, looking and reporting the other side of all the things we talked about at the end of last week. And everyone was worried about you. And I would like, if you don't mind, an update for those that are with us now to as to what happened. And you also just bear this in mind for at some point of your narration of what happened, that you said, I don't really want to share the stories directly of the people that I encounter necessarily, and I'm interested to know why. But can you tell us what happened, how it was, starting with the flight in and the trucks on the airfield and all that sort of stuff?
Well, I have been for some years now, been going south of the border, Mexico, going there, going Central America, going South America, following these migrant caravans. And it's because I felt no one was really asking the question when all this came up, during Trump's first term was when the whole discussion of open borders really kind of took off, and building a border wall. And it was very much in the news, but it seemed to me that no one was asking the question, what's going on south of the border? I mean, why are these people coming? Now, CNN's explanation for that was to say that it was due to climate change, which is complete nonsense. But I thought,
how dare you? That's the one that YouTube are going to get upset about. Acknowledge that the migrant caravans are from climate change, Larry. It's called pushback.
That's right. There we go. They are saying that it's all because they're fleeing climate change, which is complete nonsense. But rather than just going to the border, I wanted to go across the border and well across the border to begin interviewing these people and seeing who they are. And many of them are victims of Democrats and of the global left. Two things can be true at the same time here. And that is that I want our borders protected, and I want them protected with lethal force. I want machine guns on those walls. I want people to understand you do not come into our country illegally, because there will be, just as you were talking about a moment ago, there will be consequences, severe consequences. That said, I do care about many of these people. I'm not talking about the criminal element. I'm not talking about the cartels. I'm not talking about the militia types that are being sent into our country as sleeper cells. But I'm talking about people here who are victims. And you say, victims of what? Well, victims of two things. First of all, the global left that invited them, that is encouraging this. They told them, come on, America's the magic kingdom. It's a great pinata. Come and get what you want. Or Britain is, and we'll give you preferential treatment in farmland, or whatever it is that's going on there. So they're victims of this, and they don't care what happens to them from A to Z, which is from their country of origin and their travel to the United States. So when I'm going someplace like the World Economic Forum, my podcast is called Ideas Have Consequences. That's where the ideas are hatched. But then let's go down to the real grassroots level and look at the consequences of those ideas, which is something these people don't do. So that's why I would be in Egypt at Mokattam, Garbage City, as it's called. It's why I would be on the Polish-Ukrainian border talking to Ukrainian refugees, war refugees pouring out of that country, which I was listening to Theresa May and chatted with her about at the World Economic Forum, that she says they're all helping, and they're not. And that's why I was talking to these migrants in Brazil and Colombia and along the Venezuelan border and Peru and Chile and Argentina and Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, you name it, going into Darien Gap and seeing what these people are actually enduring, what is happening to them. And I particularly wanted to know, Laza, what would happen post-election. What would be the impact of the election? So I stayed up election night until about 1:30 a.m. Central Time, which is about, -6 Greenwich Mean Time. And
I was up pretty much all night. I remember it. I remember knowing Trump had won. I think I did a video from bed. Oh, rotating cuff.
So there you go. So all stayed up to see the results of that, and then a few hours later, I hopped the plane and I went to Mexico City, and I went to a lot of these migrant camps that are around the city, and then I went from there to Colombia and into cartel country to see the migrant camps there too, because I wanted to see what was the impact on those migrant camps. More of the camps, same as ever? Were they bigger? Were they smaller? What was happening? And what I discovered, Laza, which is so fascinating, is that the migrant camps around Mexico City, they were much smaller. And I mean a fraction of the size they were just a few months ago. I've been to these camps several times, but I started thinking, because there was a mayoral election, a presidential election in Mexico. Some of the campaign promises were to clean up Mexico City. And so the police came in with tear gas and, shields and nightsticks and drove some of these people out. So I thought, is it just that the migrant camps have moved, or is it that with Trump's election, they're turning back? And I thought the only way I can know the answer to this is to go to Nicoclí, Colombia, which is a cartel town. That's a jumping off point to the Darien Gap. And it is where the Biden administration, using the UN and a series of NGOs, is working hand in hand with the cartels. It's a symbiotic relationship, working with them to move these migrants northward. That's what's happening. But I knew
you're being a bit unfair about the UN, because if you look on the UN Human Rights Council, they've got places like Venezuela and North Korea and Pakistan and places like that on there. They're really good, the UN. They're not the UN, Larry. I'd like to say to YouTube, could I just take a moment to say everything Larry is saying is really, really hurtful to me, and I find really personally offensive. And I like you, instead of writing an email to me, I'd like you to write an email to him.
you you can send it. You can send it to me,
He
and
needs a
I'll tell you
strike.
where to stick it. But
Yeah, sorry.
I knew that Nico Clee would tell me because it is the bottleneck. Wherever the migrant camps are, they've all got to go through there.
Yeah.
They unless they're being flown into the United States, and in some cases they are. But anybody who's going on foot has to go there, which is where they catch the ferries to Akandi and begin their journey through the Darien Gap. So that's why I was going there. So I flew down there. I found some bush pilots earlier this year who were very good pilots, took a twin prop. They were willing to go down there to one of these abandoned airstrips. And the way these airstrips work in the third world, the ones that are not actual airports per se, because there's no staffing of these airstrips. They're out in the middle of nowhere, out in the jungle, or something, or some farmer's field. So what they do is they put some kind of obstacle on it, usually livestock, maybe trucks, maybe tires, something, so that there are no ghost flights. You can't just simply fly in and out before they realize you're there. Your pilots end up circling the runway trying to come up with a plan, or waiting for someone to get whatever it is off, or maybe buzzing it as we did last time, buzzing it to try to frighten the cattle off of the runway. Well, in this occasion, there were big semis parked out on the runway. And so we're circling, and what that allows the baddies, or the good guys, the police, or sometimes the same thing, to do is they look and they see and they go, "Who's circling? Who is that?" So by the time we landed, we had quite a reception there. And the pilot said to me, "We think we can land without hitting these trucks, but it's going to be close." Because the runway is, much truncated. So we land, hit the brakes hard, avoid the trucks, but the police are there with sirens, and it's quite a reception committee that's waiting for us. And the way you kind of have to do this, Laurence, is you don't fly. I always tell them, don't file a flight plan, because if we do that, it is better in the third world to do it and say you're sorry than to ask and be told no. I don't want a big reception committee. I don't want them to have a lot of time to think about the fact that I'm coming. Let's land. If the police meet us there, then we'll go, so sorry. We didn't mean to do this. And so that's what happened. It gave me a little bit of time to look around the town and to answer the question that you'd asked me, why do I not? And I've been really processing, your question, because it's a good challenge to me. But I've been processing this question of yours to me. Why don't you show or tell the stories of how you're helping some of these people? Part of the reason is because, just as a Christian, I don't want to be a Pharisee that rings the bell as they did and says, "Everyone look at my good deed and what I'm doing for these people," because that's not my purpose in helping them. On the other hand, it does humanize the story, and you've pointed that out to me. It's very true, and all this is just by way of saying that I spend about a fair amount of time talking to these people, and almost always I end up finishing by saying, "How are you feeding your children? How are you feeding your family?" These people have nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. And so I usually end up taking them to what we would call in America convenience store, where they buy fruit, vegetables, canned goods, things of this nature. And almost always it's followed by tears, sobbing, people throwing their arms around you. It's very easy for me to do. You would
But
do it.
you were saying to me this thing, which I thought was really amazing, about this girl that you met, and I hope I'm not betraying. Well, I'm not betraying her confidence, because no one knows who she is. That you were sort of gently asking her how she got up here and what her motivation, all of that sort of stuff, and it was pretty implicit by her response that she had been selling her body to try and make the money to get the ferry. And then you'd gone, okay, let's get you some food. So you went to food, and she sort of modestly bought out. What did she buy? She bought out just one.
Crackers.
Yeah, crackers. And you're like, no, babe, you've got to walk through the fucking Darien Gap here. Get yourself some proper nourishment. And she got a load of canned goods and stuff like that. And I just thought, in this difficult struggle that we have with compassion, which, what does compassion mean? It means going on a journey of passion with somebody. Is that right? Compassion, I suppose. So you're trying to go, I want you to be equipped for something I've actually witnessed, and even I just was really struck by the sheepish naivety of someone selling their body to get to a place, to go through a jungle, which is a complete, absolute shithole, hellhole of wild animals and bandits, and she put in front of you a bag of crackers. And you're trying to tell her to buy, tins of anchovies or tuna or whatever it is, your corn, whatever. That actually is a wonderful thing to do, because it's like the iPhone arriving. I think a lot of international migration was created by this device that I'm talking to you on now, which is someone gets an iPhone and some 4G signal in, the shitty city outside Cairo where the Christians live, and they go, oh, there's a place where you can go and be whoever you want. I've seen it on YouTube. That to tell that story of might make the people that thought of making that journey stop. Because your idea, which you said repeatedly, is that we don't need you to come to us. We need to help you make your country better. The whole teach a man to fish, feed him for life, give him out a fish, feed him for a day thing. So I'm just interested. I wonder whether, I know it'll be something you write about and stuff like that, but I wonder whether these stories would make very powerful testimonies for the people that didn't know whether they wanted to. As you just said, the drop-off rate in the migrant caravans is massive straight away, because they know that Trump's going to be hard on the border. You may not have the Larry Taunton border with God bless the USA playing 24 hours a day and men with 50 cals, but we can't all have what we want. But they know, is there a way of intellectualizing it? Because these people are clever people too, and they're going to be sold a false promise of something. Is there a way of saying to them, look, you can go home and make your own country a better place? You can do that. And your demonstration of Christian love and forgiveness to that, not love and forgiveness, but love and understanding to them, might make the smarter ones, the less criminal elements, as Trump says, they're not sending up their best, might make them go, you know what, I want to make my country like America. I want to make my country like free democracies around the world. That's what I want to do. I don't want to sit on a caravan on a false promise of dying somewhere and having to sell my body to some cartel member who, instead of dealing drugs, is dealing my body, which is vile. It's worse than dealing drugs to deal in humans.
Let me tell a little story that will illustrate what you're talking about. I met a lovely Mexican family who had me over for dinner and toured me around the city a little bit. These are people who are fairly well-to-do, live in a very fashionable neighborhood, children being educated in private universities, and people who are quite successful. And during dinner, they were asking me, "Why would you go to these migrant camps? I mean, this is dangerous. This is very dangerous around our city. Why would you do it?" And I said, "Well, why don't you come with me tomorrow? Why don't you come along? And you can see, you can do a little bit of translating for me." So I took them to a place called Tláhuac. Tláhuac is, not in the city center. It's a little bit on the outskirts of Mexico City, and it's where the Haitian caravans are. And that's because the Haitians, being French speakers, they separate themselves out from the other migrants. So, other migrant camps. And when I say camps, that's a much more grand term than what we're talking about here. We're talking about cardboard boxes, rats, you name it, now, on sidewalks. So just think of thousands of homeless people living on sidewalks. Think of San Francisco. So
London, any city, yeah.
That's what it is. And so the Guatemalans, the Peruvians, the Colombians, Venezuelans, they have they're kind of together because they're all Spanish speakers. But the Haitians a little different, and the Haitians are fleeing cannibalism, they're fleeing Satanism, they're fleeing civil war, and they're kind of a scarier lot. They're much different. So my driver takes us all out there. They go with me, and I say to them, "Stay in the car until I can initiate conversation with these people." And so I get out. They're, I wouldn't say hostile, but they're not friendly at first. And that's because they're very vulnerable. Their children disappear. They disappear. There's no documentation of them. Detective Sergeant Hathaway is not coming looking for you. That's just the reality of the situation. So I, indicate to them. I use a word that they know, journalista. And they begin to chat with me just a little bit. And they know some English, but they know a little bit more Spanish. And my French isn't particularly good. So I tell the dad, get out of the taxi and you can come and join me now. And you can begin to translate. And we begin to listening to some of their stories. Now, a policewoman comes and tries to cut all of this off. She says, I'm not allowed to speak to them. And she tells the Haitians, if you talk to this journalist, and I don't like to say that I'm a journalist. I'm a writer. I actually have an education, but that's a separate conversation. But she's telling them that she will remove their permit to camp on the sidewalk. And they get their backs up at this point.
Permit to camp on a sidewalk. I mean, for fuck's sake.
He says they can't talk to me and I can't talk to them. But they get their backs up and they tell her to go away, and they start talking to me a little bit more. And now the whole family gets out of the taxi and comes over and is listening to my conversation with them. And at the end, I say, look, as I always do, how are you feeding yourself? What's happening? They say, well, we sell candy, we sell lollipops, for a nickel each. And I said, that's to try to feed all of you. Yeah, we do that. We cut hair. We try to offer some services. And I'm sure some of those are just selling themselves. That's very, very common. And I said, if you'll show me a convenience store, we'll go there and I'll let each of you get, $20 worth of food. So we're talking about a lot of people. And soon word spreads throughout the camp. This gringo is going to buy $20 worth of food. So more and more people keep coming. And I say, yeah, okay, you go ahead. Yeah, okay, you go ahead. And one of the people in my group was tallying everything to make sure they didn't go over $20. And at some point, God's grace is infinite. And I don't say this with sarcasm. I mean it. God's grace is truly an infinite reserve of grace. My grace, unfortunately, is limited. I can't buy $20 worth of food for everybody in that camp. So I had to cut it off somewhere. But then what started happening is these Haitians who had previously been wary of me, they're now, some of them are quite emotional. They're putting their arms around me. And I noticed the father, who had just the night before, dinner in his house, this Mexican father, very nice man, who had expressed great concern, and not just concern, but a real, I just don't get it. I don't know why you would do what you do. What's the point of this? Now he's very emotional. He's very emotional. And he says to me, I get it. I get it now. I see what you're doing. And he quoted this. He says, Christ says, as you treat the least of these, so you treat me. He said, I would like to help you pay for this. And he was deeply, deeply moved. And when we left later in the taxi, he's patting me on the shoulder and he's saying, I feel that, God has brought you into our lives. I feel something very powerful is happening here. And the point that I would want to make is that you and I both know people, Laurence, who do what we do for a living. They're writers or they're public, commentators, but they get up in their Mayfair flat or their Manhattan condo, and they put on a robe and they hit the coffee maker and they go and watch some lefty, TV show on BBC or CNN, or listen to a podcast or read the New York Times. And then they begin to pontificate on all these issues, having never been in a red state, having never been on a British farm, having never been in the third world to actually see how their warped ideas affect people. And I want to be guilty of that.
It's that I know you don't like listening to podcasts, but it's my favorite thing that Victor Davis Hanson repeats and repeats and repeats over and over and over again in his writing and in his podcast, which he goes, these people are sheltered from the consequences of their own ideology.
I love that.
And I really, and the other thing he said this week, by the way, which he's not a hyperbolic guy. he speaks like this at this volume, and he goes, you know what? Yes, no, okay. And he said what happened with Trump was the single biggest epochal shift in his 71 years on this
I
planet.
agree with that.
Now listen to me, my friend. My son is coming through the door. So I've got to go and be a dad for 12 hours because that's what the state allows me.
Is it Eugene?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, tell Eugene, there was a song when I was in high school called Eugene is the way the song would go. My name is Eugene. I stick my hands in fans for fun. You need to look that song up. Need to look that song up and give it to Eugene. It needs to become his theme song. I haven't heard that song in 40 years, but we got to find it. Listen, the two of us, we do not ever want to be guilty of becoming the sort of people who are insulated from our own ideas.
No.
And I never want to be the sort of person who doesn't actually know what's going on in the lives of other people. I want to see what is happening in their lives. And when we're talking about migrants like this, again, two things can be true at once. I want strong borders. I want a sensible immigration policy, but I do want to make sure that this part is clear. Where CNN says these people, when we're speaking of South America, these people are fleeing climate change. It's a damnable lie. They're fleeing. Think of this.
You're gonna get us a strike. Just say stuff like that. Look, let's rethink this. They're fleeing. Obviously, they're fleeing climate change. You know, over 70%
Political climate change.
Over 70% of South America is underwater. Ever since the polar bears moved in, climate change is, for me, the biggest problem that mankind faces. And climate change denialism, like you're doing, leads to institutional racism. And I want YouTube to understand that I push back strongly against Larry's narrative. All right?
You want that on record. Just a very short little history. In just the last 3 years, Chile, the most stable democracy in South
America. I know, you said it last week.
Brazil.
I know.
Colombia, Honduras, Peru, all the Marxism. That's what they're fleeing.
In just the last short 800,000 years, the sea level hasn't risen. 200 million years. The sea level hasn't risen at all. So we're all fine. Fuck the lying bastards. Sorry to swear. And next week, what I'm going to talk to you about, I've got a little thing that I want to talk to you about because I want to try and marry this. You can have two ideas in your mind at the same time. One is a strong border and the other is compassion directly to human beings. Can there be systemic compassion? I would be interested to know. So we will discuss it next week. I'm sorry to have to run, but I literally get my son for a short period of time.
You take care. Take us out.
I love you. This is me. God, I went to proper school. This is Larry Taunton and myself talking to you about the issues of this day. Sometimes it is sun. Sometimes it is night. But all the time is alive. Water is life. From what the Fox and Taunton? Goodbye. This episode. Goodbye. Thank you.